Hi, it's Coach MK again, and the podcast filming got moved to tomorrow. So I had a little idea since the last week's Facebook Live with my husband, Alex Fleming, went so well. And that podcast is not yet dropped. It should later today. I want to give it one final listen before it goes out into the universe because it's a really touchy topic. But the next one that we're going to be filming tomorrow that should drop later in the week is kind of a touchy topic too. So the things that I don't say, I can't get credit for work that I'm not talking about. So, and I also get a lot of emails from people who think I'm talking about them. There is no passive in my aggressive. If I'm talking about you, you're going to know it. What I'm usually doing in those moments when I'm trying to be vague is I'm trying to make sure I don't say anything that hurts the people that I love most. And there's no one that I love more than this guy. I mean, Tamara is a pretty close second. So thank you, Tamara, for bearing with me all of the times I've been begging you to make sure I got the podcast, itself and the notes exactly right. But when you hear the next podcast, you'll understand why I wanted to have this conversation as well. This is my husband, Alex Fleming. Hi, honey. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mr. MK.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this, even though this is I don't specifically intend to humble you, but
okay.
Part of my journey has been to look back on my messier times in my life.
Trust me, you couldn't possibly humble me more than I humbled myself in business school. So it's okay.
Well, I mean,
not a chance.
There were a couple reasons we didn't exactly talk back then.
That's true.
Didn't
exactly talk. We didn't talk.
No, I avoided eye contact. But if you were to ask, I think a lot of our classmates about Alex, they'd be like, "Let me tell you the Brenda Taylor story." Would you like to tell the Brenda Taylor story in your own words?
Sure.
And then at the end, I'll come back and tie this into how this matters about the podcast. Sorry to take your name in vain, Brenda.
Hi, Brenda. Anyway, so the Brenda Taylor story. So preterm, August of 2006, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Sorry, our kids had a slime thing this morning. I'm still finding it all over myself. Anyway, it's just part of the game around here.
I was like, could you not do that on camera?
No, literally, I discovered I had some slime on me. It was awesome. Anyway, and so August 2006, I'm fresh out of the military, and there are parts of the military that are more rule-abiding than others. But if you ever look up a guy named Hyman Rickover who founded the nuclear navy, he's probably about the most rule-abiding person in the 20th century. And so I arrived in business school after, and this was actually, I spent a year at SAIS, SAIS is an international relations school, so a lot of military and ex-military people there, and I was in a program with mostly military people, the strategic studies program there.
After being at a floating tin can at the bottom of the ocean with only dudes for 6 years.
Yeah, so arrived from a submarine, arrived in Washington, D.C., a place that's friendly to the military, and then arrived at SAIS in a program with most ex-military people. So it was kind of a comfortable off-ramp. And then I arrived at Wharton, which is probably a greater degree of non-military away from there. And so, did a summer in the State Department, got back from Russia, and then arrived at preterm in Philadelphia, where I had lived for 4 years in college. So it was good to be back in Philadelphia. And preterm at Wharton is, fondly described as math camp. And you're paired up with people who are kind of going to be in your cohort. And for the life of me, I cannot remember if this happened in the third or fourth week of preterm or in the first and second week of classes. But it was when I started getting put together with my cohort, which is cohort G. And
you're with your cohort all the time for the first year. It's very intense.
This is
the
about
same 30 to 50 people.
Same group of 40 people who you go to pretty much every single class with. So you see them all day long. In every class, and you have assigned seating in every class, and so you basically are all sitting in the exact same place, and kind of it's a process. And so there was one among us, Brenda Taylor, who also as incredibly accomplished as anyone else who arrived at Wharton.
No. let's be real. I'm sorry. I got to interject
Or
there.
more accomplished. We'll
Yes.
go with that.
She is gorgeous.
Olympic athlete, you know.
She is gorgeous. She was a world-class hurdler. She went to Harvard. She's like, I mean, if there's like on paper, you will never beat Brenda Taylor, period.
True.
I mean, have you seen how tall a hurdle is? Oh my God. Like, she was the best at the world in jumping over those things. So, and she's nice.
So, yes. Olympic athlete, you know, kind of, you know, it's not like she was the head of the Israeli sniper school. We had that one too, but you know, she's still very accomplished. And so Brenda was in my cohort, and you know, at that point, like I said, people arrived from all styles and walks of life, and you know, I entered probably with about the same sensibilities I'd been in the military. I'd kind of had a psychological pause at SICE, but I was probably still in the same headspace I was in the submarine force. And so, you know, so I was, you know, one of those people who, you know, they read you the rules at the beginning of business school, and, you know, there's kind of like, here's the rules, right? And there's like the 10 or 12 guidelines they give you about everything. And one of them is like, you know, be on time to class, because, you know, the professor's like, if you're on time to class, and all that stuff, and not realizing that was written with a totally different set of sensibilities than the military when it means being on time. And so I, you know, took on time to class, meaning, you know, 5 minutes early, 7 minutes early, 10 minutes early, and you know, and that hasn't changed, right? It's that my wife will tell you that's still my sensibilities, but left to my own devices. And so Brenda Taylor, and you know, and there were a few other people in class, but she was just the one who I don't even know why to this day, but I just noticed her the most. Is she would generally come in, you know, 5 to 7 minutes late to class with a coffee. And so clearly, like, she'd come from Aubon Pond, which is in the building, right?
There's only one place.
There's only one place to get coffee. It's always long lines, and so you know, you're much faster at getting coffee if you wait till like 3 minutes after class started, and then you get coffee in like a second. If you try to get it 10 minutes before class started, you know, you're done. And so you know, it was you know, her habit was, at least, and this was in the first few weeks of class, was to, you know, come in, you know, sometimes 3 minutes late, sometimes 5 minutes late, sometimes 7 minutes late, always with a cup of coffee. And, you know, this was, you know, in you know, as an ex-military guy, this kind of thing was like, you know, just like a splinter in my brain, right? It was just like, oh, I can't believe this. You know, they just gave us a speech. We're in business school, we're supposed to be on time to class. This person's like walking in 5 to 7 minutes late every single class. And some of the teachers were annoyed by it. But some of the teachers they just, you know, were so zoned out and used to it at this point, they didn't even care. And so, you know, was she disruptive? No. Did she come in, you know, screaming and yelling? No. But, you know, the door open, the door shut, you know, kind of somebody else unpacking their stuff. So, like I said, it wasn't like she was being disruptive or doing anything or interrupting anyone else's learning. It was just kind of, you know, I was like, oh, it's a splinter in my brain. And so, and I literally do not remember what exactly prompted this. We had a cohort listserv. This is literally like year 2 of Facebook. Like, you know, yeah. Facebook had just become a thing, maybe 18 months beforehand.
A lot of us hadn't been on it.
A lot of us, you know, nobody, like Facebook, like my first massive group of Facebook friends was the class at Wharton that fall. And so I cannot remember if it was something on Facebook. I think it was a cohort on the cohort listserv where we get emails. And so like these big reply all chains about, you know, who's planning what party or who's doing what in class or something like that. And so I think, you know, and so one of my other skill sets, apparently, and this is, you know, something I've been told to this day, is I have the ability to write what I think are incredibly clear and concise communications in text that, when read by someone else, appear extremely, I would call it harsh. Or
it's like when I speak.
Like, you know, it's so I think I'm being totally concise and precise and using the least amount of words to express an idea, and everybody else like, Alex, oh my God, that email is so mean.
I've had to walk back to emails still this day. I'm like, wow, no,
yeah,
you can't say that.
Yeah.
When I'm telling you, you can't say that.
Yeah, so it's like, so and my ability to compose this very harsh text does not reduce even after, you know, several hours at happy hour. So I am not able to, you know, kind of I am still able to compose totally coherent textual communications, which also, not a great thing. And so, this was it was a complicated time at business school. A lot of unpacking about where, what I was going through and all that. So for some reason that to this day I cannot remember, either last few weeks pre-term, first few weeks, and I don't even think I actually mentioned her name in the email. But amusingly, everybody knew exactly who I was talking about. And so I replied all to some email to the cohort and said, kind of gave this, probably, couple paragraph speech about respect and punctuality and how if you're coming in late, you're disrespecting the teachers and everybody else, and just kind of threw it out there and said everybody should be on time. And amusingly, like I said, to this day, and I probably look up the email because I'm sure it's still in my sent email somewhere, I don't actually think I even mentioned Brenda's name, but amusingly, and this is probably a point that, was not lost, is that everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. When I was talking about the people who came in 5 to 7 minutes late to every single class. And so that was, it kind of went out there into the ether, and then I probably forgot about it because, as I said, in the military, telling people to be on time is not considered something, it's yes, be on time, get yelled at or whatever. Not something that's considered particularly dramatic in the military, right? Everybody's late occasionally, but, you get, smack around once and you don't do it again. And so, interestingly, and I don't even remember, so the conversation didn't actually ever come up in cohort conversations like in the chatter in the classroom, but apparently, I learned this years later, is that email was forwarded around the school like literally like wildfire. In one of the first examples, or a very early example of, I guess we'll call it, going viral. It went viral. There you go. We didn't even have that word for it back then, but it went viral and went to the whole class. And then I was the guy who yelled at everybody for not being on time to class, and that was my reputation. Which, in the realm of the things I was known for in business school, that's actually not the worst quality I could have possibly been known for first, but it probably was not helpful, right? And so, and so in the end, how does that change over time? And that was one that my learning team and I struggled with, and we had 360 feedback. And even through the first year of business school, by the end of it, one of my learning team members, her name is Gabrielle, and she's still out there in the world, works for Vanguard now. And she even told me at the end of the first year, she's like, "Oh my God, Alex, you've calmed down so much about being on time in this year." And, and like I said, that was 1 year. And so over time, and I'm still a rugby referee because, I like rules following.
But you can understand I'm telling it now as the Brenda Taylor story because you're here.
Yeah.
But like everywhere else, it's not a story about her, it's a story about you.
Yeah, so I agree. And so yes, that was my
The story will never define her. It defines you. Okay. And then you understand now how in the context. And again, I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm saying this because like the podcast that we're going to be talking about is rule following. And I have most of my clients, my demographic widely is comprised of folks who absolutely consider themselves to be rule followers. And I'm telling this story now so that when you hear the podcast, you don't reduce my words or what I'm saying to, okay, it's rule followers. I'm married one.
Yes.
And I let him decide where we're going on weekends.
Yeah. So
yeah, so that was part of the first story I wanted you to tell. The second one is a little bit about, like, before connecting the dots too much, you're a rugby referee. You became a referee after business school, after tearing both rotator cuffs and saying this is a way to stay involved and maybe, get paid to be there instead of paying with body parts to be there.
Yeah. So rugby is a unique sport. It's one of the few sports where there's an incredible amount of latitude given to the referees about what they enforce. And they also have a term in rugby called advantage, which essentially means if there's a rule broken in rugby or a certain kind of foul committed that isn't too egregious, the referee generally doesn't blow the whistle, and they'll put their hand out to one side and basically say, as long as the other team that was, the offense was committed against the team that was getting, against whom the offense was committed, as long as they have the ball and they're gaining advantage from it, the referee will not stop play, right? And then they will just let play keep going and let advantage emerge. And if it's clear at some point that the team that was offended against is not going to gain advantage, then the referee will blow the whistle and bring it back and start again. But there's that concept of not immediately blowing the whistle when there's a rule broken, which is one of the hardest concepts for young rugby referees to grasp, which is, you see a rule broken, you want to blow the whistle, right? And so as you become higher in rugby refereeing, you begin with knowing the rules, but then the higher forms of the art are when do you allow advantage to emerge and in what situations? And then what is the context of the game? And then you get a lot of feedback and advice as you're a middle and approaching a higher level referee around a concept called materiality, which essentially means that, you're in a game, there's a lot of things going on. There's, rugby, a rule book referee could literally probably find 100 violations a minute in any given game if they had perfect knowledge of everything going on the field. But within that minute, are any of those 100 possible violations of the laws actually material to the outcome of the game? And that's in the end, the answer to 99% of them is no. And what you're trying to identify is not the 100 possible rule violations, but the one rule violation that is material to the outcome of the game. And then is, if it is material, then can you allow advantage to emerge and keep play going? Because it's, essentially rugby is balancing two factors. It's continuity of play and contest for possession, right? And so your first lesson is maximize continuity of play by as few stops as possible, by being conscientious about allowing advantage to emerge and when the rules matter and judging materiality. And so so I've been rugby refereeing for 10 years now, and I will never be a international panel referee, and that's not really what I wanted to do. I kind of enjoy the sort of the middle level play, which means there's lots of penalties going on, right? So, men's and women's Division III, Division IV adult, which are, people who play rugby mostly for the drinking, they commit a lot of fouls all over the place, all the time. And they're generally egregious and obvious, but it's also a continuous lesson in applying the question of materiality to the rules involved in rugby.
What he's trying to say is that, like, when he's a referee, the type of games that he's refereeing are club matches. They're not, I don't want to say the matches that don't matter, but they're not part of, like, the NFL. Like, these are dudes that are part of a rugby league that people just like us, still trying to stay connected to the game, only they want to play it, whereas my husband has been told not to by someone that needs him to have two functioning arms. Yay. So to that end, it's
messy.
It's messy, but they're playing rugby on the same level that I'm running and that most of us are running. And that had to be hard to sort of let go of, but there was a violation, but the violation doesn't matter. That had to have been a hard thing to reconcile.
Yeah, and it had a lot to do with where I started refereeing. So you start refereeing in, New York City and that area, which covers, kind of Connecticut, Long Island, North Jersey, and I was very much a rule book referee. So I literally would law book, or they call it law book referee, which is, I'll beat you with the law book. And like I said, you're technically correct, but it doesn't make you any friends in the players.
But it doesn't mean you're right. You're correct, but it doesn't mean you're right. Yeah,
exactly. And then I moved to South Texas Rugby Union, which, was fun and got more schooled there. And then I moved to the Rocky Mountain Referees, which is actually probably the most experienced and knowledgeable collection of referees in the country, because USA Rugby happens to be here in Colorado. And so we have a lot of international panel referees, which are people who are very senior, who provide a lot of guidance and coaching for the referees who ref around here.
He'll show up and there'll be like a really senior, like superstar referee, like watching him that day and giving him notes on how to improve. Free coaching, which is kind of cool, but it's also like, that's a lot of corrections. Like, I'm out there, I'm like, or you're out there, you're the referee of the game, and like they're kind of telling you when you were right and when you weren't. That's
Well, they have referee coaches, who are the people who are supposed to make you feel helped, and then they have the referee evaluators, which are the ones who are just kind of make you feel, making notes and saying, all right, you did, here's what you did wrong, or here's what you can improve on, and same concept. So long story short, even though I will never be an international panel referee, I think the more I've enjoyed refereeing much more in the last 3 or 4 years, because of my level of ratcheting down on the law book, the strict law book, and an understanding of what is the context of the game, and what is the materiality of this particular situation. So if I look back in retrospect upon the Alex Fleming story in the first month of business school, which as I said, my first viral explosion, we'll call it, on the internet, I would say that in retrospect was the fact that one of my classmates came in 5 to 7 minutes late and not being disruptive. And was there anything possible that I could have gained by calling that out? No. Was there any reason whatsoever I should have cared that one of my classmates was coming in late every class? Not really. And was it worth the attention that it later caused me? Not really, no. Though in retrospect, it was probably displaced by some of my later conduct in business school. So in the end, it was the first thing people heard about me, but definitely not the last.
Have you ever apologized to Brenda? Have you two ever talked about it?
I think we did talk about it. I remember speaking to her about it later in the first year of business school, and we at some point had a conversation about it. But the answer is I don't remember exactly how apologetic I was at the time. Only because, like I said, we didn't really, and Brenda and I didn't really talk.
I mean, I can understand that. Now would be a good time to just
Brenda,
say that.
I'm sorry, Brenda, about all that. And it was definitely an amusing situation that was an expression of things going on in my head, less than it was about you. So.
Oh, well, did you ever have that moment of saying, like, to yourself, why am I so angry about this? What is this emotion? Now, as someone who's been in therapy for 20 years and forced to do that on a weekly basis, what am I really mad at, and what does this anger say about me? What do I need to?
So,
or would anybody have been able to say that to you in a way that you would have heard?
At the time?
Well, like at the conversations now you have with this, like you called this play, you called this foul, I don't know the language for it. As a referee, you can have that now conversation with someone else and be like, well, you called this why, and you can talk through it. Why do you think this was material? But most of us can't have that conversation with ourselves at all in an objective level. I'm really angry. Why? Why does this bother me? What do I care? What does this matter? Kind of just observing those feelings as they rise and being almost like an impartial observer, because that's really what acceptance is. It's observation stripped of judgment. And most of us can't do it. Rather than judging, we'd rather judging our emotions or thinking about ourselves, we would rather judge another person. It's just so much easier to say, real broken.
Well, so to answer your question, no, I was not capable of those conversations at the time, nor was I really capable of those conversations until many years after business school. So
if you were
the short answer would be no.
Okay. If you were going to coach Alex Fleming, if you could go back, if you could be like that referee evaluator, like talking to a younger Alex right before preterm started, what would you say?
I honestly don't think anything I could have said would have possibly penetrated.
But what would you have wanted to tell him?
No, I mean,
I mean, it's not about what's going to be effective and what they're going to hear. I'm a coach. I know people are just not going to hear what I say.
Well, I said, so all of the things you were saying, though, correct. I was not, the person I was back then was not ready to have those levels of self-awareness conversation. It was just not possible. So I would have told told him that you Alex are coming out of a situation for the last 4 years when you were deeply traumatized for not following the rules well enough, and your response to that was to traumatize yourself until you follow the rules better, and you eventually arrived at a level of self-punishment that allowed you to get some measure of success by using your intelligence to be better at following the rules than anyone else. And that means that when you encounter people who have arrived at their position in life and have never experienced that level of trauma and pain, because they, and like I said, maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but it's obvious that their trauma and pain has led them to different behavioral standards than you, you will not respond well to people who you see as breaking the rules and not being punished for it in the way that you were. And so, but at the same point, that person was not even remotely ready to hear that at the time.
Most people aren't. I would say anything that you feel is legitimate and anything that you do is a legitimate response, right? You can't not follow the rules in the Navy. You can't not follow the rules a lot of places in the military. Mm-hmm. So the survival skills necessary to help you succeed in one particular environment does not necessarily translate to success in a different environment. So as you swap environments, you need to be aware of what those coping mechanisms were and be partially somewhat prepared to discard them if you want to, because at the end of the day, the question is, do you want to be right or do you want to be better? Or do you want to succeed in this new environment? They can be mutually exclusive questions. Says the person that now curses a whole lot less than she ever used to. And God knows, a lot of the things that I did to survive or to cope or to fit in are things I don't do anymore. And that's been a really fun process for me to kind of, in this stage of my life, to figure out who I am and just say, I can do whatever I want. What do I want to do? It's something I've never really had the luxury of thinking about, but it's been a hell of a ride. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I know it's hard. It's always hard.
That was my first time going viral in business school. Awesome. Not the last though. That'll be a different discussion.
Yeah.
Next time we'll do a pod. Well, at some point, I'm sure we'll work into the Mantor podcasting, the A-list story, and we'll have to take 4 Facebook Lives to unpack that.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to go there. I really, really wasn't. I just think that this one, there's only so much on. I just thought that this is really important. Before I start talking about rules and which ones to follow, the final thing to note is every rule that it's a rule follower, in my brain, is characterized by the anxiety around not a rule not being followed. And that is usually not attached to the situation itself, right? So no, you weren't harmed in any way by anyone being late in that classroom. If anything, what was triggering you is
yes, that's true.
Multiple things how dare she? I couldn't have done that. It's not fair. No one's ever let me just do whatever I want. No one's let me show up late. Why is no one saying anything to her? I can imagine that because I've been that person. I'm a woman. Dudes get away with all kinds of things I'm not allowed to do on the reg. It's you need to know how to ask correctly. And I'm really? Thanks. I totally lack social skills. But there are all kinds of things that people are allowed to do or free to do that I'm not. And I'm getting ready to put a whole lot more of those aside as I coast into adulthood. So to that end, I know how maddening that is, that perceived unfairness. I felt it too. So I all of it, and I think a lot of other people have as well. I just want to make it really clear before we go into this podcast, I'm not beating up on rule followers, but you got to acknowledge too, there are rules you choose not to follow. It's not about I follow all rules all the time, perfection. It's about, rule followers are just as bad as anybody else as picking and choosing which rules they're going to follow and which ones they're going to be meh. Would you disagree?
I see your point. I will never be that person. So.
I love you. Thank you. All right, that's it. The things I don't say in the podcast are usually, or the things I do say in the podcast are always said with this guy in mind. And this is truly how I approach most things. I'm it is, let's look at the why. I'm never about damning the person. I kind of look at the forces that shape that situation. But also in this particular story, I was not on the receiving end. So I'm not going to tell anyone how to feel or how to deal. What I am going to do is sit back and observe a whole bunch of reactions to a whole bunch of rules and whether or not application of those rules materially changes certain games that I'm going to be playing in never going to be as fast as Brenda Taylor, but I used to be fast, and I'm going to get back there. Yay!
And if you really want to have a good side activity when you're listening to the mantras and podcasts, so I listen to them every day, and it's interesting for me because I know what moods she's in every single day when she's recording these things, and I know what's going on at the house, and I know what's going on with the kids, and I know, and even though I'm on the road, I can hear from the babysitters, things that have happened that day. So it's just an interesting part of my day is trying to not listen to the mantras and then pull out the parts that I think were probably intended for me, and in the mantras and podcasts. So if you ever want to entertain yourself, while you're listening to the podcast, you're like, I wonder which part of this is directed at Mr. MK, and see if you can guess. So it's a good way to entertain yourself.
Saying you are more than the sum of any hurt you would have caused yourself in the past. You are more than some of your mistakes. You're the best daddy in the world. I mean, you are covered right now in glue and ketchup and toothpaste.
Ketchup, glue, and toothpaste. Yes.
They thought the girls, when I was walking out the door, the girls were like, "We're making slime." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well, she was leaving me alone with 5 children.
I should have. Yeah, I forgot.
So she's like, "Oh, by the way,
there's
an extra child coming for the day you take care of the kids."
This is why I need to get back on Adderall. I totally forgot. I forgot about the golf tournament yesterday. I forgot about the slumber party that we were supposed to have. I told him at like 3:30 yesterday. Oh, you have to go pick up Hetta. Sorry.
I'm like, yes. No, so I will have not 4 but 5 children. Now at the same point, the psychological difference between 4 children and 5 children is very minimal.
There's no plural to the word chaos for a very good reason.
It's but at the same point this morning, she's like, "Oh, that's great, go make slime," and we should have.
I thought they had his permission. We should have talked. I've been like, "Yes, your daddy."
We should have had a more specific definition of the methodology for making slime, because then I look in the backyard and I see 5 bowls and like 4 empty toothpaste containers and a ketchup bottle and a thing of glue. And I'm like, I had one of those moments where I was like,
there's no rule about that, is there?
Yes.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right, guys. Love you. Go enjoy your Saturday. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Peace out, running world.